Chapter 32. Act 2. For the next 4 weeks, I had 2 main goals. 1. Help Ronnie cope. 2. Learn as much about paradise as possible. The first goal was pretty fun. Ronnie and I went on long walks through the gardens, gorged ourselves on amazing foods, snorkeled with dragon turtles in the bay, danced like crazy at the beach bonanzas, and had daily contests to see who could find the most ridiculous outfit in the clothes-generating closet. I declared Ronnie the ultimate winner after she found a hideous, scaly green poncho that made its wearer look like a bloated avocado fish. We ordered the pear-shaped monstrosity just so we could laugh at each other wearing it. Ronnie wasn't ready to talk about Jack. I broached the topic a couple times during our first week on Paradise, but she always blew it off. I decided to wait until she brought it up. Occasionally, we'd see Jack and his wife from a distance, making out on the beach, getting handsy in a hot tub, feeding each other cherry grapes, and doing various other gag-worthy activities that displayed their obsession with each other. I wondered if I'd find that behavior cute and romantic if it had been Jack and Ronnie instead of Jack and replacement. But as things were, anytime I saw the blissful couple, I suffered a pang of vicarious heartbreak and promptly changed direction. Ronnie enjoyed adventuring with me, but she still needed time alone. Every day after lunch, she excused herself to go hole up in her room for a few hours. I wasn't sure if that was healthy, but it wasn't my place to tell her how to cope. I used my free afternoons to accomplish my second goal: learn as much as possible about Paradise. I had tons of questions. Who'd built the resort? Why had they built it? How did the island manage to independently support the lavish lifestyles of all its ridiculously chill inhabitants? I started my quest for answers with Dr. Greensboro. She might have been the least talkative person on the island, but she was also a scientist. That meant she was inherently interested in how things worked and how they had formed. If anyone knew about the inner workings of this island, I bet it was her. Dr. Greensboro wasn't exactly thrilled when I showed up for a second day at her field research station. She was even less thrilled when I offered my services as a research assistant, but I proved my usefulness. I was strong enough to schlep her equipment up the mountain paths, which, even with her heaviest packs, was 1,000 times easier than bushwhacking up the stream. I had good enough handwriting to record her dictated observations, and since I was a good 14 inches taller than her, I could hold the microphones she used to record bird calls much higher into the canopy than she could. On top of all that, Arlo liked me. That had been enough for Dr. Greensboro to tolerate my presence. After a few days, she even welcomed my company in her own reserved way. Once Dr. Greensboro was comfortable with me, I began asking her questions about the island. She proved to be unexpectedly long-winded in her answers. I guess it came from her years as a professor. She'd never admit it, but Dr. Greensboro missed having students to lecture at. She could lecture to Arlo, of course, but the only follow-up question he ever asked was, "What? Guava? Guava for Arlo." I, on the other hand, asked tons of follow-up questions. Question by question, I carefully excavated Dr. Greensboro's treasure trove of knowledge. As I suspected, the former professor was intimately familiar with the intricacies of Paradise's daily maintenance. First, she taught me about the offshore generators that harnessed wave energy for the island's electrical grid. Then, she explained how the service bots received and transmitted their orders via a central wireless network. On one of our daily hikes, she pointed out where the giant desalination and water treatment stations were hidden. On our third week together, she even took Ronnie and me on a tour of one of the hydroponic farms in the Western Valley. "How did you figure all this out?" I asked Dr. Greensboro as we watched the service bots harvesting perengos. "Same as you, I inquired," came her vague response. She shut down any follow-up questions. Well, except Arlo's request for guavas. That plump little feather bag always got what he wanted. My interest in the island's backstory was quickly replaced by my interest in Dr. Greensborough's. What was she hiding? Did she know more about the resort's origin than she was letting on? Had she lied about only being here for 4 years? Perhaps she was the mastermind behind the entire operation. Had she been the one to write "Come and See" on my boat? Unfortunately, Dr. Greensborough's eagerness to divulge information did not extend to her personal life. It took me weeks of casual questioning during snack breaks to piece together her backstory. And this was all I'd learned. Lila Isabella Greensborough had entered into a commuter town northwest of Aradet City about 30 years ago. Her hosts had been professors at Aradet University. They'd used their position to get her enrolled at the university within days of entering. Young Lila had quickly discovered her passion for ornithology and proceeded to get every zoological degree possible. She'd found the standard ornithological canon to be rather deficient, so she'd written her own. Before the ink on her doctoral diploma had time to dry, she'd already been published in every major scientific journal in Aradet. When the old head of ornithology at EU retired, Dr. Greensborough had quickly been appointed to fill his position. Head ornithologist Greensborough had lived a happy, uncomplicated life of preparing lectures and publishing peer-reviewed articles. But all that had changed when a fellow professor presented her with a groundbreaking discovery: the mummified corpse of an unknown avian species. The professor claimed he'd received the corpse from a redcap who'd found it on a Panosyn boat. The mummified bird was enough to convince Dr. Greensborough there were lands beyond the mist full of new species to survey. She'd felt it was her scientific duty to sail east and find them. And that was it. Or at least that was the simplified version she'd been willing to share. I'd gotten hints she was holding back a few major details. For example, on one particularly muggy day, Dr. Greensborough removed her overshirt. Her bare shoulders revealed something interesting etched below her left collarbone, an elaborate vine tattoo. I knew a thing or two about shoulder tattoos. When I first met my school friend Kara, she'd asked if I was from the Southwest Islands. I'd been confused by her question, so Kara explained she'd seen the edge of my fire mark and thought it might be a tribal tattoo. With an embarrassed stutter, I told her it was nothing but a giant entrance mark. And because Kara was awesome, she immediately started asking questions about the science of fire marks. That had been the start of our friendship. My exchange with Kara had made me curious enough to research the tattoo customs of the southwestern island tribes. I'd learned when an islander couple gets married, they tattoo each other's left shoulder above the heart. It was a symbol of their eternal love. According to tradition, the more intricate a marriage tattoo was, the stronger the relationship would be. Based on the ornate pattern over Dr. Greensborough's heart, she'd once been in a deeply committed marriage. I was dying to ask her about it, but I didn't want to pry. She tended to clam up the moment I asked any personal questions. I figured the best thing to do was to be her friend and wait to see what she wanted to share. That waiting paid off on my 30th day in paradise. That day was, by far, the hottest day I'd ever experienced. Sweat pooled on my face and chest the moment I stepped outside the air-conditioned resort. Even Dr. Greensborough thought it was too hot to be trekking up the mountain. She declared it the perfect day to monitor shorebirds instead. Dr. Greensborough, Ronnie, and I packed a picnic lunch and walked to a secluded western cove. There, we watched adorable little birds called sanderpips scurry around the beach and dart between the waves. Dr. Greensborough explained they were probing the wet sand for crustaceans and other coastal creatures. It looked like colossal work for such a small meal. I looked at my own lunch, grateful I hadn't had to sprint around a shore break to get it. My gourmet pesto turkey salad on artisan focaccia had required zero effort on my part. It had simply appeared when I ordered it, just like everything else on Paradise. I savored a large bite of my effortless sandwich while Dr. Greensborough explained her survey. Our task for the afternoon was to count the sanderpips so Dr. Greensboro could better estimate their total population. It sounded simple enough, but proved to be deceptively difficult. The little birds danced around each other with the same mesmerizing coordination as a school of fish. They moved more like one giant organism than 100 individual birds. After an hour or so, Ronnie and I were so hot we joined the birds at the shore break. But unlike the little brown sanderpips, we ran toward the water. We splashed each other and swam out far enough to duck dive through the waves. I loved the unique massaging sensation of the waves rolling over the back of my legs. I floated on my back and let the ocean rock me into a tranquil lull. Once Ronnie and I felt sufficiently cooled, we swam back to shore. Ronnie lay out on her towel and promptly fell asleep. I sat on my towel next to Dr. Greensboro, eating grapes and watching the sanderpips deftly dodge the breakers. I raised my gaze to the western horizon. Somewhere out there, thousands of miles away, was Eridet. No one there even knew paradise existed. How was that possible? Why had no one made the journey back from paradise? Was I supposed to be the one to bring that knowledge back to Eridet? Was that why I'd been called to come and see? "Hey, Dr. Greensboro," I ventured. "When you finish your biotic survey of the island, how are you planning on getting back to Eridet?" "When my work here is concluded, I will resume my journey east on Panosyn's boats," she responded absent-mindedly. She was still scribbling observations about the sanderpips on her notepad. "Why not sail west? We know it's only a 10-day trip back to Eridet." "A reasonable suggestion if it weren't for the mist." Dr. Greensboro set down her notepad. "Only a boat with a guidance stone can successfully navigate the mists, and the guidance stones infallibly lead east." I wrapped my arms around my knees, considering. Is there hard evidence that it's impossible to get back through the mist? Has anyone ever tried to sail west? Dr. Greensboro rolled her pen distractedly around her fingers. "I've encountered one person who left paradise and later returned." "Really?" I sat up straighter. "Who and how?" "It was an academic colleague of mine," Dr. Greensboro said hesitantly. "The same professor who brought me the exotic bird specimen." "So he traveled here with you?" "No, he was here when I arrived." "Wait." I frowned, trying to sort out the timeline of her story. "So he brought you the dead bird, then he sailed east ahead of you?" "No, he was on Pier 7 for my departure." She twirled the pen faster around her fingers. "Yet he managed to arrive on Paradise before me." "But that doesn't make any sense." "I am aware of that." Dr. Greensboro pressed her lips together. "Nevertheless, those are the facts." Her fingers fumbled and the pen flew off into the sand. She didn't bother retrieving it. "Wait." I snapped my fingers. "Was this Professor Guy blonde with blue eyes?" "No, quite the opposite." She closed her eyes, looking inward. "My colleague was dark-haired with highly melanated, monolitid eyes." I smiled at the preciseness of her description. Trust an ornithologist to describe her fellow professor like a scientific specimen. "So, it sounds like this dark-haired Professor Guy already knew of Paradise's existence and he showed you the dead Tukad to entice you here," I theorized. Dr. Greensboro nodded. "That is a logical assumption." My mind reeled with questions. "Did he tell you why he wanted you on Paradise?" "He said he needed a resident ornithologist to monitor the bird populations. He claimed he was worried about the possibility of mass extinction due to invasive species such as house mice or from viral diseases such as Bernguy fever." Her voice trailed off and she subconsciously rubbed below her left collarbone. "So this guy was in charge of the island then?" I asked. "He wouldn't say." "But he's the one who showed you the generators and the farms and stuff?" Dr. Greensboro nodded again. I leaned toward her. Did he tell you anything else about the resort? Why it was built? Who pays for it? Dr. Greensboro trailed a finger through the sand. He claimed paradise is a social experiment to find the difference between comfort and happiness. Do you believe him? She shrugged non-committally. He was a professor of moral philosophy. Then she paused to consider the question more deeply. I believe he withheld a great deal of information from me. If this is some kind of study, I fail to see the efficacy of it. Furthermore, I question his source of funding. Without clear monetary gain, it's nigh impossible to procure investors for a project, and we know he certainly isn't self-funding a secretive island resort on a professor's salary. She added with a wry smile. I smiled back. That was the closest I'd ever heard her coming to making a joke. I dug my hand into the soft white sand next to me as I considered the new information. Was paradise really a social experiment? Or had the mysterious professor merely said what a scientist like Dr. Greensboro would want to hear? I couldn't think of any way someone could be profiting from paradise. It wasn't like we were paying to be here. And if the resort was some complex moral philosophy experiment funded by an eccentric, secretive billionaire, how was data collected? Wouldn't the service bots need to be handing out customer satisfaction surveys or something? When did you last see this professor? I asked, sifting a handful of powdery sand through my fingers. You said he left paradise and later returned. Is he here now? Can I meet him? I have not seen him in over 2 years. Dr. Greensboro glanced out at the ocean. He returned only once to check on the progress of my survey. I do not know when or if he intends to check in again. A strange pang of jealousy ran through me. Why had this mysterious, knowledgeable professor been around to personally guide Dr. Greensboro when all I'd gotten was Cindy, the friendly but superficial smile queen? I must not be important enough for him. What about the other island residents? Had anyone else been personally guided here by the professor? Have you talked to anyone else about this mysterious professor? No. Dr. Greensboro shook her head. He requested I do not discuss these matters with anyone else. I never formally agreed to those terms, but I saw no reason to violate them. Until now. I feel honored by your trust, then. I smiled at her before turning my gaze back to the sanderpips. As the flock continued its coordinated dance around the waves, one little sanderpip broke formation to peck at something I couldn't see. It's less about trust and more about interest level, Dr. Greensboro admitted. In the 4 years I've been here, no one else has inquired into my past. You, however, are relentlessly inquisitive. You aren't satisfied until you're sure you've heard the entire truth. I can't decide whether that would make you a star pupil or merely a headache in an academic setting. I let out a snort of laughter at her frank assessment. A large wave broke across the beach and threatened to sweep up the solitary sandpip. The little bird dashed away just in time, but whatever it had been pecking at was lost to the sea. I have just one question, came Ronnie's muffled voice from her towel. I hadn't realized she was awake. Was this dark, mysterious professor guy single